Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark. Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. It's Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. This is my show, my channel. I'm TC. If you have never tuned in before, you are in for a treat. You are in for a treat. Oh my gosh, I don't know. It's been a couple of weeks. I took a couple of weeks off. Last week, I went down to my local city council meeting and gave them a little bit of a lecture on the First Amendment and what that looked like and why the First Amendment applied to them. And so I did that last week on Monday night, and so I didn't do a stream. And the week before, I just decided I wanted a week off. And so here we sit. I've been camping out on some information and camping out on a lot of things. And lo and behold, on October 7th, Hamas decided they were going to be the terrorist asswipes that they are. And decided to pull off a well-orchestrated attack on Israel and the innocent Israeli people. And that's why we're here tonight. And it's probably not going to be a very easy conversation for some of you. Some of you aren't going to like it. Some of you are definitely going to be upset with me. And I'm okay with that because truth often does that. So, hey, Gravy, thanks for stopping by. Tony, thanks for Tony Johnson. Thanks for stopping in. And if anybody has any comments or any questions or anything they'd like to say or whatever, feel free to put it over in the live feed of the comment section. I will announce right now that after tonight's show, my good friend Walter Hudson has agreed to come on Wednesday night, and we're going to talk about a couple of issues. Some of it's going to be the U.S. House of Representatives speaker debacle, and mostly we're going to be focusing on our differences with that, but intently focused on the issue with Israel and Hamas and Israel's treatment of Palestine. We will definitely be talking about that. Walt got confirmation from Walter, and we're going to talk about that on Wednesday night. If you guys haven't yet, you could see my scroll down below. If you haven't gone over to my Subscribe Star, pick the level of support there. I would love for you to do that. It's not cheap to do what I do. I've got to keep the internet going and keep the equipment up and running. And so head over to Subscribe Star. Shoot me some support there. I'm going to be working on starting a Buy Me a Coffee, it's kind of another crowdfunding site. And if you just want coffee, let me know. Or if you would like some merchandise, let me know. My merchandise people are they're working on some new designs. And I also, for those of you in cold weather climates, I have the beanies available. If you're interested, let me know, and we can get those to you for the cost of the product and shipping to you. So, without any further ado, let's just get to it, okay? A lot of people have been pushing back on me because I have been pushing back on them. I've been pushing back on the narrative of standing with Israel. I've been pushing back against Zionism, and I despise Zionism. Zionism is not just, as my friend Walter said to me earlier today, Zionism is just the belief that Israel has a right to exist as a nation. I don't dispute that. Israel is a country. We cannot argue that. We cannot change it. That'd be like trying to change the the fact that the United States is a nation, a sovereign nation. There's no changing that now. But that is not what Zionism is. Okay? I'm just going to throw that out there. That's what Zionists would like us to believe. Hey, Tomsky, thanks for stopping in. I haven't seen you in a long time. Zionism is kind of foisted on us that it's just Israel wanting to be Israel. It's just Israel wanting to have a country of its own. It's not. Zionism is at its core an ethno-state, ethnocentric belief system that only Israel gets away with. Excuse me. Only Israel can get away with that. Only Israel can demand a country where Jews are in charge. Nobody else gets to do that. Now, people will say, well, there are countries out there where the predominant population, in India, Indians are in charge. Okay. Well, in Germany, Germans aren't. Well, it used to be the case that Germans are in charge. But only Israel gets to demand from the rest of the world that everyone bow to their to their goals, to their intent, and that anybody that would consider themselves an ally must be okay with them being an Israeli, not an Israeli, a Jewish state. That's it. And what happened to them on October 7th and subsequently what's been going on has been horrible. I have no qualms about that. I will tell you flat out, I believe that what happened to Israel at the hands of Hamas was horrible. It was evil. And I also will tell you that their response in leveling so many places in Gaza, and they're, we gave them 24 hours notice. We have sometimes 36, 48, 72 hours notice here in the United States when a hurricane is coming, and we can't even manage to get 2,000 people to move, let alone 2 million people. And, the argument, well, the Palestinian people voted for Hamas. Yeah, a long time ago, and not all of them, and many of them that are alive today weren't alive when that vote took place. There hasn't been another vote allowed. And does that, America voted for Joe Biden. So if somebody's mad at us for that, should we be okay with suffering the consequences of that? Well, you guys voted for him. Well, I didn't. Do I get a pass? I didn't vote for him, so do I get to wave a card? It's not me. But what I want to focus on is who started this conflict. Who really ultimately started this conflict? Who started the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and all of her, between the Palestinian people? Who started the conflict in Israel or in the Middle East between Israel and her Arab neighbors? Who started it and why? Why was it started? And if you go back far enough, the place has changed hands numerous times. I mean, Rome owned Israel. Rome owned Israel. Try saying that, by the way. Rome owned Israel for quite some time. And in AD 66, or excuse me, AD 70, they destroyed Israel, which caused the Great Diaspora, which caused the sending out of the Jewish people around the world. And that was really kind of the last time that the Jews really had a power base there, and even then it wasn't theirs. It was Rome was in charge, and then Rome eventually lost it. The Muslims came in and conquered Jerusalem. Tomsky. Bring back the British Empire. None of this shit was going on back then. We were way too civilized. Until it comes to football, Tomsky. And then you all lose your minds. But anyway, Um, so the Muslims, the Saracens, sacked Jerusalem and took control of it. It became a holy place for both Christian, or for all Christians, Muslims, and Jews. And really, ever since the diaspora, the Jews haven't been in control there. It's been either under the control of the Muslims or under the control of the Christian marauders and crusaders uh, under the Roman Catholic Church. And ultimately, for the longest time, it was in the hands uh, of the Muslims. And most recently, for the Muslim people, Israel was under the control of the Ottoman Turks until they lost it to the British for a very brief period of time. But then the terrible, tragic thing that came out of the diaspora was the Europification of the Jewish people. And the reason I say that's terrible is not because they shouldn't have been out there, but they lost their Middle Eastern culture and became firmly embedded in uh, European tradition. And the European Jews became vastly different than the the Middle Eastern Jews. Vastly different, incredibly different, um, both philosophically and culturally different. They may to some degree share a religion, but Judaism in and of itself is a religion, but being Jewish is not a religion. Being Jewish is really ultimately to be Hebrew, and which is there again not a religion. It is an ethnicity. And so as the diaspora sends the Jewish people out into Europe, Eastern Europe and Western Europe, and out into other places, because there are Jews in many, many, many places. Uh, the rise of the Third Reich took place. And that took place on the back of he who shall not be named and his absolute hatred for the Jewish people and his gathering of Jewish people from all around all the corners of Europe and the the terrible terrible advent of the Holocaust against the Jews, and not just against the Jews. I mean, he went after gypsies, he went after Christians, he went after homosexuals, he went after a lot of different groups of people, but no one suffered more than the Jews. And we could talk about the rise of the World War II. We could talk about the motivation of world powers that got involved. We have to be honest. No one got involved in World War II because of the Holocaust. It was only after the involvement of the Allied powers in World War II that we'd even discovered the Holocaust was going on. There was rumors of it, but no one believed that anything like that could be happening. And when you read the reports, the written memoirs of American service members and British service members and French, members of the French resistance who then joined up with the Allied forces and the Soviet Union, and man, the things that they did to their Jewish population too, by the way, folks. Let us not forget what the communists had done to not just Christians, but to Jews and to Muslims. And to Muslims. Uh, Right, Tomsky. As you said, the British government knew that Polish Jews were being slaughtered by the Russians. Absolutely. Um, so we did get to this point where we discovered the Holocaust. It really was true that the rumors were true and that this was happening and that millions were dying. I despise Holocaust deniers. I despise them. I think they are a base form of life. They're probably not even human beings, to be honest with you. Um, but when we look at the end of World War II the world was left with a problem. What are we going to do with all of these displaced Jewish people? And we ran into a problem there because a lot of the countries that they came from didn't want them back. And quite frankly, hero of World War II, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and then ultimately Truman, they didn't want the Jews here. If you don't believe TC, go look it up. The world did not want the Jewish people. You wrestle with that. If you disagree with me, go look it up. It's a fact. We spend so much time hating on the Third Reich, and rightly so. The Third Reich was terrible because of how evil they were and how they had so much ethnic hatred and anti-Semitism and all of that. We absolutely have every reason in the world to despise them for what they did. But we have got to wrestle with, we have got to understand that at the end of World War II, there was no love for the Jewish people. None. It was absolutely nobody out there was clamoring to have the Jews come into their country. And the U.S. was just as guilty of that as everyone else. They saw, the U.S. saw a rise of Jewish immigration for asylum seeking or whatever as a potential threat to the stable nature of the U.S. They saw the Jews as a destabilizing block of individuals. And so shortly after the end of World War II, the UN was formed. And then shortly after the formation of the UN, the solution to the problem was proposed. And European Jews were given their homeland in their eyes. European Jews were forcibly inserted into the Middle East, into a culture that they did not know, that they did not understand, and they were given this carved out section of land that we called Israel. It hadn't been Israel in hundreds of years. Really, it hadn't been the Jewish nation of Israel in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. But unlike what the Zionists would have us believe, because what the Zionists want us to believe is that there were really no Jews in Palestine. There were no Jews in that area, and but it was rightly theirs. And what ended up happening was this insertion of the Jewish people from Europe, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, from Europe into this Middle Eastern culture where, I might add, thousands upon thousands of Jewish people, they were called Palestinian Jews in some cases. Palestinian Jews, Middle Eastern Jews, like we're talking Abraham's children had been living side by side with their Palestinian neighbors peacefully in their own enclaves, in their own little neighborhoods, in their own little cities, in their own little towns, own little villages, doing their own thing and getting along famously until the United States, through the auspices of the United Nations, with the agreement of England, with the British Empire, that still what was left of it at the time, forced a foreign culture, onto both the Palestinian Arabs and the Palestinian Jews. And that changed everything. Now, what could be the reason for that? What did we learn during World War II? We learned during World War II that petroleum was gold. And we also knew that petroleum was the greatest export of the Middle East. It was a treasure in the Middle East, and it still is. But we wanted their petroleum. We wanted that because we wanted that reserve. We wanted that petroleum reserve of the Middle East to be in the hands of the Western power. And when I say Western power, folks, let's be honest. American hegemony. I'm an American. I love my republic. I love what's left of my republic. But I'm also an anti-interventionist. I'm also an anti-war individual. And I have had to change my views on a lot of things about the United States over the years. And one of them has been anything that the U.S. does in warfare is good. And I'm sorry, I'm typing a note to myself here while I'm looking something up while I'm typing this. But the U.S. is just as much of an imperial-minded, hegemonic nation as anyone else. In fact, to be honest with you, for the longest time, we were a unipolar world under the American Empire. I mean, you don't cross the U.S. If you're an American ally, you don't cross us. The Brits have learned that. The French have learned that. Many of the NATO countries have learned that. The South American and Central American nations have learned that. Cuba learned that the hard way. You don't cross the U.S. You make an enemy of the U.S., or the U.S. makes an enemy of you for something that you did that didn't go along with our agenda that we had planned out for you, then there was going to be a problem for you. And right, Tomsky, the U.S. has had a empire for the last 60 years. I agree with you. I would say it's been building for longer than that. I would tell you personally, Tomsky, that the United States has been an empire since Lincoln destroyed the Republic and pissed all over the Constitution. I am an anti-Lincolnian, by the way. I'm a Jeffersonian. But early in the history of the country, but especially after Lincoln, we forgot the Washingtonian philosophy of avoiding entangling alliances. It was, Jeffersonian in the sense that Jefferson used entangling alliances and Washington used unstable alliances. But between the two of them, they're right. They're absolutely right. We should be avoiding entangling alliances. And that means military alliances and alliances to grow democracy, whatever the case might be. But the United States inserted itself in its victory march around the world after condoning the firebombing of Germany, after condoning the nuking of Hiroshima and condoning the nuking of Nagasaki and all that other stuff. It inserted itself into world politics. No, Tomsky, that's not okay. I do not believe it's okay for the United States not to recognize its imperial designs. I cannot get the regimist to call it what it is. But it is what it is. What it is. It's an empire. It's been an empire, and we're still trying to hold on to the empire. We're in the waning ages of the American empire, and you can see that play out in places like Ukraine. And we'll be getting there, folks. By the way, um, so the United States inserts itself into the Middle East via Israel. It forces Israel onto these people, and literally forces both Palestinian Jews and Palestinian Arabs out of homes, out of land that had been in their families for generations and generations and generations. And this is a thing that I don't see anybody talking about right now. I see it come up in a meme here or there, but pictures of these, 80, 90-year-old Palestinian Arabs who were living in Palestine before Israel was formed in 1948. And saying, I'm older than your nation. And it's true. And that's because the United States started the hostility. The U.S. started the hostility. The U.S. caused the instability. The United States hegemonic empire building interventionist mentality that they took on themselves because they believe, hey, we won World War II, which, by the way, we couldn't have done without the Soviet Union, which opens up an entire different can of worms. But they insert themselves into the Middle East for one reason and one reason only. They call it the advancement of Israel, to give Israel a place of its own. But they insert themselves into it and then tell Israel, you are our protectorate. I mean, let's be honest. Israel, for all intents and purposes, is the 51st state of the U.S., but it also functions as the capital of the United States, surpassing the importance of Washington, D.C. I did not deny it's an empire, Tomsky. I keep calling it an empire, you goofball. You know what? You keep talking smack, and you're gonna have to super chat me. If you want me to read any more of your smack talking, you gotta super chat me. But anyway, we intentionally destabilize the region by inserting culturally European people who happen to also be Jewish into that region, taking away homes of Palestinian Jews and Palestinian Arabs and others from them, taking their land, taking their property, taking their businesses, all of that. Hey, thanks for stopping by, Brandon. I'm the Angry Vet's a good solid friend of mine. All of that, they took all of that under the influence and of the UN, which there again is ultimately the United States. The United States approved all of this, but that wasn't it. That wasn't enough for the U.S. That wasn't enough for the empire of the growing, burgeoning empire of the United States. We did something else. And some of you are like, "Oh yeah, the U.S. has done a lot of things. Yeah, we've done a lot of shady crap." But in the 1950s, the United States began. How do I want to say this? The United States began a program of destabilization in Iran, actively working in Iran to destabilize ultimately the Shah, who was the king. I mean, the Shah was the king of Iran. You know, the violence that was being done in the Palestinian region, in the Middle East, was about to come to all new levels as Iran fell to the fight over communism and then ultimately into the hands of religious extremists in the Ayatollahs. And it fell. The Shah of Iran and his family fled, and Iran then became an avowed enemy of the Jewish people because of the work of the United States. the imperial mindset, the empire building U.S. destabilized Iran because they wanted, yet again, they wanted the petroleum, they wanted the oil in the Middle East. And that's when the problems really started. But Israel was in, they were there. They weren't going away. The U.S. was never going to let Israel go away. The UN was never going to let Israel go away. But they made enemies very quickly. And the U.S. then began to have problems with the Middle Eastern Arab countries. That's when the U.S.'s problems with the Arabs began, was with the enforcement of, or the insertion of, non-Middle Eastern Jews, culturally European Jews, into an area that was not their home. We just decided, here, this is yours because you want it, you want to claim it. That's what happened. The United States began the destabilization. We began the violence. The U.S. began the violence. Let's own this together, Americans. We, the United States, began the violence in the Middle East. We caused the overthrow of Iran as a democracy. And I'm talking, it wasn't just, marginally a democracy. Even under the Shah, it was a very modern country. It was a very modern country. It would have been, kind of like the France or England of the Middle Eastern area. And because of the influence of the U.S. in that entire area, everything went to crap. And eventually, the Arab people said, enough is enough. Now, there's a lot of talk. Well, nobody wanted the Palestinians either. Okay. It's true. I'm not going to argue that. The Palestinians weren't well liked. They just weren't. They are a segment of people within Islam that a lot of countries don't like. The Syrians don't like them. The Egyptians don't like them. The Jordanians don't want them. Lebanon doesn't want them. And so they were kind of like isolated. They were forced into this area, this strip, and they were a problem. They were a problem because nobody wanted them. And then all of the Arab nations get together and they decide that they're going to take out Israel in the 7-Day War. 1967. The fecal matter hits the whirling blades of the oscillating air mover, and it begins. I mean, there had been conflict after conflict after conflict the way it was. But the Arab attack on Israel started this cascading event that has become the conflict that it is today. And here's something that, I wish more of my fellow Americans would understand. Israel is not our ally. And they demonstrated that in the 7-Day War when they attacked the USS Liberty. And I'll try to remember to put the link in this video. I sat down with my co-host of Veteran Nation, Mike Arthur, and we interviewed several of the survivors of the attack on the USS Liberty. And subsequent to that, my research, even more research, I've found, it's been revealed, that the USS Liberty, not only was it intentionally attacked by Israel, but it was intentionally attacked by Israel because the USS Liberty, as a intelligence gathering vessel, discovered or intercepted communications that proved that the Israeli military, the Israeli Defense Forces, were committing atrocities against Palestinian civilians. They were there to monitor the communications. They were there. The Liberty was there to monitor communications. They were there as an observer, not to participate, but to observe the fight. And they were ultimately there to try and help Israel. We sent the Liberty down there to help monitor the communications. And so they were monitoring Israeli communications. They were monitoring Arab communications. And there was concern that Russia was going to get involved. The Soviet Union was going to get involved. And so they were monitoring all of this. And the USS Liberty was attacked by the Israelis, knowingly and willfully attacked. They made every effort to sink it. And not only did they try to sink it because of the interception of the communications showing the atrocities being committed by Israeli defense forces, they also were trying to suck the United States into yet another war. Because they wanted that ship sunk, they wanted it disabled and then sunk. They wanted everybody on board that ship dead so that they could try and suck the U.S. into coming in and being part of the armed conflict against the Arabs. Because Israel wasn't real sure they were going to win that war. Now, ultimately, they ended up winning, but not before they killed a bunch of Americans on the USS Liberty and tried to sink the vessel of a sovereign nation that was their ally. And like I said, I'll try to remember to put the link in the description of this video if you guys would like to hear the eyewitness testimony of these American sailors. Sundan, you can post it if you'd like. I don't know if anybody will see it or follow it, but I don't. Yeah, that's fine. I don't care if you post it in there. But so the U.S. comes in as a destabilizing force. Shock of all shocks. Everywhere the U.S. goes, they destabilize. If you guys are familiar with commentator and stand-up comedian extraordinaire Dave Smith, he says in the opening of his show that if you want to know who the U.S.'s next enemy is, ask, who are we funding now? Iraq took them out. Funded Afghanistan, ended up fighting them. We're funding Ukraine, which means we're probably going to end up fighting Ukraine pretty soon. And on and on and on. Over and over and over. We fund them, then we fight them. We fund them, then we fight them. But there's so much more to this than just, oh, Israel has a right to defend itself. Sure it does. You attack Israel, Israel has a right to defend itself. But what's going on? Are we willing to pull the threads of the great hegemonic sweater that the U.S. is trying to throw over the world? Are we willing to pull the threads? Are we willing to pull the threads of that empire and say what's really at play here? And I believe that I have that for you right now. So we're going to watch a little bit of this.
Right after 9/11, about 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today. And he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries.
Listen to this, please. Very, very carefully.
In 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran. I said, is it classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, don't show it to me. And I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, you remember that? He said, sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you.
I'm sorry, what did you say his name was?
Let's go back and listen to that one more time.
Sir, I didn't show you that memo. Classified? He said, yes, sir. I said, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
The last country on that list for destabilization and regime change is Iran. Who have all the war mongering, bloodthirsty, neocon, left-wing war hawks and right-wing war hawks and whatnot. Who are they blaming for this, folks? Who are they blaming? Are they blaming Hamas? Yes, they're blaming Hamas. They're blaming the U.S.? Nope, not blaming the U.S. Are they blaming Israel? Nope, it's not Israel's fault. I mean, Israel can do whatever it wants. Israel can shut down water. Israel can shut down fuel. Israel can shut down electricity. Israel controls food and medicine going into to the Palestinian people. It's an open-air prison. Palestinians cannot leave. They cannot just freely come into Israel proper. They can't leave and go into any other country. They cannot go out under the water. They can't. Israel gets no blame. Israel can go in and bulldoze Palestinian homes and put in new settlements for Israelis. They get no blame. That's fine because it's their country. Israel gets no blame. Who are we blaming? Well, we blame Hezbollah for problems with Lebanon when they attacked the Jews, Israel. And can we please stop, by the way? When organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah attack Israel, they're not attacking Jews. They're attacking geopolitical Israel. That's who they're attacking. Because many of these people have lived side by side with Jewish people for generations. They're attacking geopolitical Israel. Who's at fault? Who are we blaming? We're blaming Iran. We blame Iran for Hezbollah, and now we're blaming Iran for Hamas. But guess what, folks? Iran didn't form Hamas. Iran didn't build Hamas. Bibi Netanyahu and his people built Hamas. Why? And there again, if you don't believe me, it's out there. The facts are out there. Bibi Netanyahu and his people built Hamas as an opposition party to the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. They built Hamas because it was easier to control Hamas than it was to control the PLO. And they won an election, and Iran took influence of Hamas. They took influence over Hamas. But we're blaming, the United States is blaming Iran. The U.S. is blaming Iran. Joe Biden is blaming Iran. Joe Biden is called now, along with people like Lindsey Graham and other war hawk bloodthirsty individuals are blaming Iran, calling for regime change in Iran, just like they are calling for regime change in Russia. Why? What's going on in the world? We want regime change. We want control. See, the United States doesn't allow its own people to drill for oil in its own land. We can't frack, we can't drill, we can't have oil producing platforms off the coast of the United States anymore. We can't build new refineries. We are totally dependent on other countries for oil, but we've got the petrodollar. Oil is traded in American dollars. And some countries are trying to break away from that. And we're seeing the formation of BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, Iran, China. Why do we want to destabilize Russia? Why did Joe Biden say that he wants Vladimir Putin out of power? They flat out said their goal in this fight in the Ukraine between the Ukrainian people and the Russians, and I condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but I don't believe that the Russian invasion of Ukraine has been the genocidal nightmare that everybody says it is. We want to destabilize Russia. We want the regime, the Russian regime as it is now. We want it destabilized. We want Putin out because we want to weaken Russia. We want to weaken Russia because Americans have been told you have to hate Russia. You must hate Russia. You must hate the Russian people because they're all nothing but a bunch of commie bastards. And even though it's not the Soviet Union anymore, they want the Soviet Union back. And we have to fight that on all costs. And now we're looking for what the 7th country on that list, Iran, that hasn't been destabilized yet, according to Wesley Clark. Read it. Here's a list. And every one of those countries, except for Iran, has been destabilized and flipped. None of it for good. None of it. Iraq, regime change in Iraq, how'd that end? Regime change in Syria. They're going for it, right? Look at that country's destroyed. Libya, destroyed. The Sudan, destroyed. Iran's the last one left standing, and we want to flip that country too. What the hell do you think is going to happen if we use this? Right? I keep saying if. I'm telling you, folks, this is what's going on. We're trying to destabilize BRICS to make BRICS insolvent so that the United States petrodollar stays in as the one currency for petroleum so that Iran and Russia and all the others are totally dependent on oil controlled by America, by the U.S., so that it's ours. So we're blaming Iran for what Hamas has done. We're blaming them because our goal is to cause regime change in Iran. Even though there's no evidence and no proof that Iran has anything to do with this current conflagration that's happening. And they will lie us into this war. President Biden last week stated with his bully pulpit that he personally saw evidence of great atrocities being done to infants by Hamas, and we all know what that was. That has now been proven to be a lie. It's been proven to be untrue. And if you decried it and said that, wait a minute, let's wait. Before we jump in on this, let's just see what is actually happening here before we take any more steps, before we do anything else. Can we see what the truth is? You were an anti-Semite. It's just like the excuse that was used to get us into Iraq after 2001. Weapons of mass destruction. Lie after lie after lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. It was the same thing when it came to the first Gulf War. Lie after lie. Iraqi soldiers are going into Kuwait and they're killing babies. They're taking babies out of incubators and they're smashing their heads under the ground. They're killing these babies. Lie after lie after lie after lie after lie. Ukraine, Russians are doing all of these genocidal activities. This is a humanitarian nightmare. The Russians need to be stopped at all costs. We must send billions of dollars, and if it means the American people suffering the consequences for it, everybody's going to just have to learn to tighten their belts because we have got to destabilize Russia. We've got to cause Russia to fall. We've got to cause Iran to fall. We're going to have to cause this destabilization of Iran because we just cannot have this anymore. We have to stand with Israel. Israel is our ally. Israel has done nothing but help us out. No, they haven't. Israel has lied to the American people. Israel has lied to the world stage. Israel has been predicting that Iran is going to have a nuclear weapon to use on Israel every 5 years. It's 5 years from now, they're going to use a nuke. 5 years from now, they're going to use a nuke. The only reason that any of this is happening is because the United States wants to destabilize Iran, and that's why the finger pointing is taking place. And I got news for you folks. I believe wholeheartedly, that behind the scenes, the Mossad and the United States intelligence agencies, the CIA and others, helped to orchestrate this. How? For the love of all that's holy, did the only border in the world that's more tightly controlled than the Israeli border is the North Korean border. You can't even throw a feather over the North Korean border without it coming to almost the beginning of a conflict. You know I'm right. Israel's the same. You cannot, in any set of circumstances, cross that border into Israel with hostile intents and get away with it. The Iron Dome, much of it provided by the United States, to take out rockets and aircraft and anything else, and security along the border of Israel with the Gaza Strip. The tightest controlled border in the world. I'm being bugged by a bug. The tightest controlled border in the world, folks. And a bunch of backwood terrorist sheep herders were able to put together a special operations style event reminiscent of United States Special Operations missions, put together hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of paragliders, parachutes with engines on them, and were able to fly across the border uninterrupted for 6 hours. 6 hours. The Israeli Defense Forces did next to nothing for 6 hours. And I'm supposed to sit here and I'm supposed to just swallow it all down like a good boy taking his medicine. And you're all supposed to take it too. Swallow that information down because it's the truth, because we're telling you it is. That this was just an operation ran by goat herders who hate Jews and want to kill them and wipe them off the face of the earth. Israeli Defense Forces didn't stop one of them until it was too late. And now we're getting the sob stories, and they are horrible. The Hamas did this. They did some horrible things, But did they do it because of Iran, or was there something deeper going on? And for those of you who are going to watch this and go, man, why do you hate your own country? I don't hate my nation. I don't hate my republic. I hate the regime. I hate the state. I am an anti-statist. I don't trust a goddamn thing the American state tells us. I don't trust a goddamn thing the Israelis tell us. I don't trust a goddamn thing that the Russians tell us or the Iranians tell us. I don't trust the state. The state is nothing but a lie. The state is the enemy of the people. If your government looks at you and says, we know for a fact that this is what happened, it's probably the exact opposite. And that's what they've been telling us for the last week about Hamas and Israel. They've got it all figured out. They know already everybody that's involved. The only way that they know who's involved this fast, I mean, they can't tell us who shot JFK. They can't tell us what happened to JonBenet Ramsey. We can't get the manifesto for the church shooter down in Nashville, but we know in less than a week's time, we already know everything and everyone who's behind what happened on October 7th when Hamas crossed the border into Israel and started their reign of terror. We know all that. All right? We know all of that. How? How? And why? To what end? Because they want us in another war, friends. That's it. They want us in another war. And it's working. It's working because for the last 2 years, people who I respect, people who I have come to really just go, wow, this is mind-blowing to me. The American right is finally waking up and becoming anti-war. They're sitting there saying, no, we cannot afford, nor should we be trying to afford to fund Ukraine in its fight against Russia anymore. It's not our fight. It's not our problem. Get us out of this. We have people like Matt Gaetz and others trying to stop the funding of the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian government. By the way, the Americans are paying the Ukrainian government to operate its government, not just fight the fight against Russia. We are paying the salaries of Ukrainian politicians and Ukrainian state employees. We're paying their salaries. We're funding their war. We're funding their self-defense. American taxpayers are funding this. And Americans are rightly saying enough is enough. Stop. We don't want another fucking war. We don't want another fucking war. We don't want to be involved in any more fucking conflict. We've had enough. I've had enough. I've had enough of American dollars going and funding wars. I've had enough of American soldiers dying in foreign fucking countries. I've had it. And so many others have had it. I will stand shoulder to shoulder with any American. I don't care what their political ideological positions are. I don't care what their philosophy is. I've had it. I'm done with funding wars. I'm done with it. And American people were finally waking up and saying enough is enough. And then all of a sudden, bam, Israel gets attacked. And all of a sudden, all of the anti-war right-wingers are out there going, we've got to stand with Israel. We've got to stand with Israel. We've got to stand with Israel. They're our ally. We have to help them. And the war drums are beating again. Beating and beating and beating and beating and beating. And all the stupid fucking Republicans are out there on board with it. We've got to stand with Israel. No, fuck Israel. Fuck the Israeli government and fuck the Israeli military and fuck you for trying to kill more people with American dollars. I'm sorry if the F-bombs are too much for you, but I don't give a shit anymore. Sometimes these things need to be said. I'm done with it. Let Israel fall. If it has to fall, let it fall. I don't care. I don't care. It's not my fight and it's not my problem. And the people there are not representative of the people I know that are religious Jews who want nothing to do with this. I don't give a shit about geopolitical Israel. Let it fall on its own or let it stand on its own, but let it do it on its own. If it does what it does, that's fine. When it commits war crimes, then we can address that. And they have committed war crimes. But it's not our fight. And the United States cannot be the world goddamn police anymore. Folks, we're getting ready to send more troops into Israel. Well, they're going there for medical and advisory reasons. I don't care. I don't care. Not one American dollar, not one American troop should be going anywhere in the world to help any country for any reason. I don't care how humanitarian you think it is. I don't care. I don't care. I want to see the United States fix its own problems first before it tries to fix anybody else's. We are so far in debt. We are so goddamn in debt that my grandchildren are never going to know financial freedom. We're on the verge of defaulting. But you want to keep sending American dollars to places like Ukraine. You want to keep sending American dollars to places like Israel. You want to keep sending American dollars to Taiwan. You want to send American soldiers and airmen and Marines and sailors and all in Space Force, whatever that is. You want to keep sending these people all over the world. You want them there because you're okay with American soldiers going overseas to kill people who do not look like you and don't speak your language so that they can come home and put a gun in their mouth and fucking blow their heads off because of the atrocities that you've made them commit. But we've got to stand with Israel. No, let it burn to the ground. Let it burn. I don't give a shit about any other country anymore. We have no allies because all we have are entangling alliances. Stand or fall on your own. And if you can't do it, tough luck. Tough shit. Because you are never going to come to our aid. Ever. Because you can't. You can't. You name one country in the world that could come to the aid of the United States that's actually going to be effective if somebody tries something on us. And I'm not talking about orchestrated terrorist attacks on towers and places in the United States. I mean an actual military threat to the United States. You name one country that's going to come in and swoop in and help us out. And that's not to put down my friends in Great Britain and other places around the world who agree with me on a lot of this stuff. Who's going to help us? Nobody. Nobody gives a shit about the U.S. We're flying our flags at half staff here in the United States over Israel. Fucking Israelis, the Mossad agents and others danced in the streets on September 11th, 2001 because they knew the shit was coming. They helped to plan it. That's old Janet Jackson song. What have you done for me lately? But we keep sending American dollars and American soldiers and American Marines and American sailors and American airmen all over the world to die for people who are ungrateful pieces of crap. And we can't even protect our own borders. And we can't do anything about the violent crime that's happening. And we can't do anything for the vets that are suffering in the United States. Because we keep sending all of our money to help other people. And in the case of Ukraine, the United States and the state of Minnesota brought Ukrainian veterans, amputees who lost their legs in the conflict, bringing them here and giving them free medical care to give them prosthetic legs, and our own soldiers can't hardly get that. So no, I'm sorry. I don't give a shit about Israel because Israel's never going to do anything for us, and they've never done anything for us. Ever. It's strictly a vassal state to some degree, and also our official capital, because we don't, like, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, flew to Jerusalem to sign anti-Semitic legislation to prevent anti-Semitism in Florida. He signed it in Israel. You name any country in the world. You name any country in the world that gets that benefit. Name one. Name one. Name one. I dare you. I dare you to name one nation, one sovereign nation in the world that Americans fawn over more than they fawn over Israel. And I'm sorry, you don't have to like what I'm saying, but the only people in the United States that care this much about Israel are the people who believe that 1948 Israel is a fulfillment of some sort of stupid prophecy that never actually took place in the Bible. And I know my language doesn't show it, but I know more about this crap than your normie con churchianity Christians do. But they're so in love with Israel because Israel is the chosen people of God. The Israel of today is not the chosen people of God. But you all fall for it. And you fly your Israeli flags in your church sanctuaries, and you fly the American flag in your church sanctuaries, and you fly them right next to each other as if somehow doing that, you're going to be on God's side. God isn't on the side of Israel, but he's not on the side of Hamas. He's not on the side of Iran. He's not on the side of the Palestinians. God's not on anyone's side. God doesn't take sides. If you're a Christian, you should know this. God doesn't take sides. He's on his own side, and we're all against him. And being an American and calling yourself a Christian and standing with Israel doesn't make you on the side of God. Because Israel, geopolitical Israel, is not important to Bible prophecy. Geopolitical Israel is the country, the nation of Israel that exists today has nothing to do with the Bible. Nothing. But you all act like it does. If Israel has anything, if geopolitical Israel has anything to do with biblical prophecy, it's to demonstrate the idolatry of an American Christianity and Western Christianity as it fawns all over and performs all sorts of weird sexual level acts on themselves to show Israel how much they love Israel. So you've got neocon warmongers, and you've got neo-leftist warmongers, and you've got like warmongering Christians who worship Israel and see Israel as this thing, all out here going, Israel is the only righteous country in the world. They're not righteous. They're full of evil people. They're not. It's the only democracy in the Middle East, surrounded by Arab countries. It is the only democracy. Yeah, the only democracy which is now trying to empower its police to arrest private citizens who say things that might be uncomfortable and might cause people in Israel to have doubts in the Israeli government. So many of the people who during the COOF pandemic were out there crying out against the lockdowns and the stay-at-home orders and the essential worker crap and eventually the jab mandates and all of that are out there beating the drum of supporting geopolitical Israel, fail to realize that geopolitical Israel was one of the worst countries when it came to how it treated people during COVID. But y'all okay with that, right? That's okay because that's Israel and they're our ally, and they could do that. You're all okay with that. You're all against Ukraine getting money, which we should be. But you're for Israel getting our money, which you shouldn't be. So you're hypocrites. You're hypocrites and you're fools. You're hypocrites and you're fools and you're cucks and you're simps. You're hypocrites, fools, cucks, and simps, and you're traitors to your own republic. You're hypocrites, fools, cucks, simps, and traitors to your own republic, and you're not republic-loving Americans. And you're not in keeping with the Constitution, and you're not in keeping with Jeffersonian principles, which are the only proper interpretation of the Constitution. Because you're all for entangling alliances as long as that entangling alliance is one that you worship and one that you love. I'm not going to apologize for being angry. I'm sick and tired of this. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of watching Americans simp for Israel. I'm sick and tired of you being okay with your tax dollars being stripped from you. You're a tax slave. You are tax slaves. And you're okay with your money being ripped from you by force. By force, folks. If you don't pay your taxes and you stage a tax revolt, they will come. Men with guns will come to your house and arrest you and imprison you. Imprison you for not paying your taxes so they can send money to Ukraine and send money to Israel. And your average Israeli person is wealthier than your average American per capita. But we've got to protect it because we need a strong democracy in the Middle East so we can have a foothold to spread democracy in the world. We're not spreading anything but geopolitical syphilis. I'm done. I'm not going to tell even my friends. It's okay. It's okay. Nope, you're right. We've got to simp for Israel. Israel is an evil regime. Just like the American regime is evil, just like the English regime is evil, just like the Ukrainian regime is evil, and the Russian regime is evil, and the Iranian regime is evil. Every single regime, every single power that be over every single nation in the world is evil. There are no good regimes. There are no good regimes. They're all evil. But you think that because this place down in the Middle East flies the Star of David over it, and you're a Christian, that somehow they're your allies. Well, I'm going to tell you what, Christians, if you're Jews aren't your allies in that sense. They're diametrically opposed to you religiously. They have more in common with the Muslims. But you're okay with the Muslims being slaughtered. You're okay with that. Bigots much? Say it again. You're okay with Muslims being killed. Afghanistan, Iraq, North Sudan, Iran, Yemen, Syria, Libya. You're okay with the Muslims being slaughtered, but you're not okay with Israelis dying. Bigots much? Well, they don't share the same roots of religion. They don't? Islam's not an Abrahamic religion, like Judaism, like Christianity. Jews deny the divinity of Jesus. They call him a criminal. Now, I love Jewish people. Jewish friends. religious Jewish friends. Shabbat Shalom. But I also have Muslim friends. Assalamu alaikum. But Israel is not religious. And they're not our allies. They're a thorn in our side. And they are going to see the United States destroyed before they ever, ever, ever stand on their own. Because the United States caused this conflict. We caused this, going back to 1948, for our own reasons. And I got news for you. As more and more of this plays out, we're going to find out very high likelihood that the United States black operations, black ops, through the CIA or some other organization, working together with Mossad, orchestrated this attack and put the weapons in the hands of Hamas. Weapons, now that we're being told, came from places like Afghanistan and Ukraine. Help them plan this so that we could take people's focus off of Ukraine, put people's focus on Iran so that we could work to destabilize Iran, so that we could end the assault on the petrodollar, so that we could destabilize BRICS, so that we could remain the sole hegemonic power in the world, so that we won't have to worry about a unipolar world. We could just have a bipolar world or multipolar world. We can have a unipolar world where the United States sits on top of its freaking empire, has control of the petrodollar, and everyone has to bow to us. So what are a few thousand Jews and a few thousand Palestinians for all of that? What is it? What's it matter? Why does it matter? It's a few people. It's just a few. As long as we stay in power. You're not going to like what I said. Probably some of you aren't going to like my language, and I don't care. Sometimes hard things need to be said. Iran is the last country of the 7 that Wesley Clark named that needs to fall, according to the powers that be during the Bush administration. And the American people just cannot help but get sucked into supporting another war if it means they stay on the side of Israel. I promise when I have Walter on Wednesday night, I will be far calmer than I was here in the last 15, 20 minutes. But I'm over it. The people that I'm sad for are the innocent men, women, and children in Palestine whose homes have been destroyed, who've lost loved ones, not at the hands of Hamas, but at the hands of Israel. And I'm sad for the innocent people of Israel who lost homes and lost family members and lost loved ones because this conflict has been created and orchestrated to destabilize the region and destabilize the world. That's who I'm sad for. But if the Israeli state goes up in smoke, I don't care. It's not our problem. It's not our war. And it's not ours to fight, fix, or flee. And war crimes committed by Hamas doesn't make war crimes committed by Israel any better. And lying and saying that they beheaded babies to try and get you to have your heartstrings pulled into siding with Israel doesn't make it a fact. It just makes you a dupe, a cuck, and a simp. Until next time, my friends, fight for your liberty. It is yours. Fight for your freedom because it belongs to you. And this is for all the tyrants in the world. Sixth Emperor, Tyrannus.
We are go for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.